Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the next of our PLASA seminars. This one is one of my favourite topics, spatial sound. We normally do something on spatial sound these days because it's happening. And proof that it's actually happening, on the panel today, we have some new aggregations of loudspeaker manufacturing and spatial audio processing. Aggregations that didn't exist a year ago. And for my money, it's the development that proves that people are investing in stuff and investing wisely and trying to create new workflows for well-known brands of loudspeaker. I'll explain. To my immediate right, Mr. Ben Todd, Senior Application Engineer at Harman Pro, based down at Hemel Hempstead, particularly involved with the development of JBL, which announced the purchase of a French company called Flux Immersive. I said it with a French accent for Sylvain's benefit.
Thank you.
And they have been integrated in Northridge, in California. They are now Harman's spatial audio solution. They've been around for a while. They've been used a lot in gaming, immersive audio applications. But now they're joining the big league and live sound. Next on the right is Ralf Zuleeg. I think I said that correctly, from D&B Audiotechnik. Ralf is Mr. Soundscape. And if you haven't been to Backnang with Ralf and hanging out in the anechoic chambers, you haven't lived, because this is where it all started. And it's going extremely well for D&B all over the world. Dave Haydon in the middle. Until recently, TiMax was outboard. It was just Dave and Robin, really. And then something quite remarkable happened. The company was bought by Focusrite. PanLab console is a thing, it's software, and that's also now owned by Focusrite. So PanLab and TiMax are now joined at the hip and are being integrated into the Martin Audio ecosystem as we speak. Also Linear Research, the amplifier company, all in the same house. So expect big things in that direction in terms of the development of spatial audio in every market you can think of. Simon Honywill, today's right, is also known as the Sonic Guru, which is a title he uses for his sound consultancy. He does work for Martin Audio as well, but he works for lots of people. Sound engineer, sound designer, a man of great experience. And the nearest thing I think we've got to an end user on the panel today. And finally, Sylvain Biguet at the far right works for L-Acoustics. If you don't know, L-Acoustics makes Elisa. And if you don't know that, then what you're doing in this room. But Sylvain works for L-Acoustics in Paris and is representing Elisa, the spatial audio system. So this panel represents just about every one of the big players in the market these days, and we're very privileged to have them all here in the same room. As I say, it was very much inspired by the purchases that have taken place in the market this year. So let's find out what they all do then. Let's find out, first of all, about the signal flow that's involved with these solutions. What is the physical relationship between the loudspeakers and the processing that goes on. How does it work? So,
I hope you're not going to ask me that.
no, Simon, you don't have to worry about that. You just make it sound good.
Okay, thank you.
But it helps to know about it.
I think we should start with Flux and JBL because that's a new one.
It is a new one, and it's slightly uncharted territory for us because obviously you can see from a manufacturer point of view what the benefits of having a cohesive immersive audio system are. From our point of view, it's how we leverage this new technology from Flux to hopefully democratize that process, because one of the big things that we see as being a future and important part of it is how can we bring a slightly more accessible approach to creating immersive events at different levels of the market. Obviously, we're very interested in how the hardware roadmap from a console point of view and from an amplifier and DSP point of view pan out. But in the short term, we're very much looking at it much more as a case of there's an obvious confluence of technologies where we have the wavefield synthesis element of Flux at the high end of our product range in terms of studio monitors and reference line array. But the bit that I think makes the big difference is can we start to bring those workflows into people's spaces such as community theatres, where they can start to build something and a workflow that they can grow with and move on to all of these other wonderful systems and take out on tour as well, so that we have a wider market adoption from bottom to top.
Okay. And at Focusrite, how does TiMax fit into Martin Audio's loudspeaker range?
Well, just to be clear, TiMax remains a speaker-independent processor, but for over the years, as you know, we've been doing it for many years, and we've been plugged into and still are into every speaker brand on the market. We realise that a lot of the commercial or the technical decision about what installation a venue is going to have or a show is going to have is based around the speaker choice. And whilst the speaker choice, if the speaker choice is driving the decision of what system to use, then if that has its own spatial processor, they will get that sale. So what we realised that for the growth to continue that we were having, that an alliance with a speaker brand, a quality speaker brand that was going places and has been around for years, would be a good idea. But we still maintain the independence within the marketplace to go with any speaker brand, so we work with all of them. Having said that, there is a developing sort of spatial vibe between Martin and TiMax that they will start big introducing it more into their offering, and it means that they actually can perhaps access other markets as well now more directly. And I think that's having people like Simon involved with them as a sort of an ambassador and a pioneer who knows it inside out is actually going to help that a great deal.
Simon, have you used all the systems?
I'm ashamed to say I've never used a LASA. I have experienced it, but Soundscape, yes. TiMax, yes. And in the past, this is going way back, trade show days, just making it all up as you go along, like routing stuff and doing things that, on the fly pretty much to try and bring an experience to people. But I mean, of the systems out there, I've used TiMax the most.
And do they fit into a workflow pretty much the same way, all of them, or are there different characteristics according to?
The
loudspeakers, and the signal processing was developed in-house by Ralf especially. Does that make a difference in the way they integrate with your speakers?
I think, first of all, one has to understand the workflow. You have to understand the different layers it has. It's the signal distribution, it's the simulation, it's about speaker deployment and the result that you can expect from a system. All that can easily happening in one ecosystem rather than different ones. We're collaborating with different manufacturers, with L-Acoustics, for instance. We're just working on the Milan issue, on the Milan solution, but still, it has all come together to make it a proper solution. And the important thing is, not think about today, think about the journey that we are going to take right now. The speaker is right now, it's a solution that we are used because we have it. In the future, speakers will look different to really support and improve the spatial audio experience. And then this is a completely different game. And I think all that together requires to have at least one leading mind behind all of that.
How will speakers change, do you think, Ralf?
Yeah, they have to support, the direction of the source. If you have a source over here, you don't want to have a speaker over here pointing into that direction. You want to have them all, moving around in a different way. Or you think about the theater soundbar. All of that can be solutions which we just have to investigate to make that a much more easier and, let's say, reproducible system in the future.
That's the really important point, isn't it? It's the transferability and reproducibility. Yeah.
Sylvain, is it easier to calibrate the system if it's invented by L-Acoustics? Or would it be? Is it just as easy to use L-Acoustics with TiMax, for example?
No. It's definitely helping to have these two products within the same company, because it's all about prediction. When you go into Immersive, you are speaking about more complex deployments with more speakers, and knowing in advance how you will target the audience. So with proper quality metrics, when you do predict the system design, it's really, let's say, removing a lot of unknown before you're going to deploy your show. And for us, it has greatly helped to win projects and to convince people using ELISA on the field, because it's just not only guesswork, but it's really about, you have metrics, you know how it will perform, and you know that if you go in that direction, if you deploy the system in that manner, you're going to have that such result. And it's very important for us to consider, even if ELISA is like the other software here, they are kind of agnostic from the speakers. The entire ecosystem is linked together, and there is a full system approach, and this is where there is really benefit to know, for example, in the prediction software, which speakers are used, what are the specs of the speakers, but which panning algorithm is being used as well, and how it will perform when you position your speakers in a certain way.
Okay. Well, presumably there is a reason why JBL has acquired Flux, It's still available with other speakers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's a reason, and same with Martin Audio, there's a reason why the expertise has been brought in-house.
Yeah, completely. What you just said it's a huge amount of that. How do we build a workflow? But it's great to have a really flexible and brilliant set of algorithms and a really nice software interface. But if you have a group of people who can support you from the point of the customer's first moment of, that excitement moment where they go, oh my God, we could do all this amazing stuff, and then you have to sit down and go, yeah, but how will that work and how will we actually control that? Actually, if you start that journey with some engineers who are on your side and know what they're talking about and know their products, then they can help you to realize that and bring that to the end. And then deal with little boring things like warranty claims and stuff like that. When there's a little issue along the way, if it's all built into the system, you've got one bunch of engineers working with a bunch of creatives going, right, let's get this fixed and let's get the show sorted. So, yeah.
Can we assume that there's going to be some development of MLA with TiMax and other parts of the Martin Audio range? I pick MLA because it's all it's got a lot of number crunching in it already. So
there's probably a bit of proprietary stuff that I would draw the line of talking about and or don't know any of it anyway.
I would say that.
But there's no doubt there's
I would say
conversations.
that MLA and anything that may be derived from that, the applications that gets used for are perhaps less. I don't know, I might get into trouble for saying this, but hey, here goes. It's perhaps less. It's less of an obvious partnership, I suppose. It's. I think obvious things like PoE loudspeakers and stuff like that is an obvious way to go. But I think that what's probably more interesting is what things like loudspeaker control systems can actually glean from the technology that's within a TiMax box, for instance. I think that's really interesting. I think it's going to be like a synergy, certainly within the Martin Audio Focusrite thing, which everybody's going to benefit from. I think, and whether it's an MLA or a CDD6, it can still go on the output of a TiMax and will make a noise when you want it to. But I think it's more about the synergy of the technology and the control that drives it all.
I think also there's, as I understand it, there's a bit of a roadmap for PanLab with optimal audio being the entry-level range made by Martin Audio. Thank you. And it's PanLab is more of an entry-level product, so I think literally we're going PanLab into optimal for all kinds of applications, all the way up to TiMax.
We haven't had that conversation, but there is a customer journey language being talked about.
You know,
now.
something we don't, Dave.
So don't tell us anything. But it's obvious as it's an entry-level show control solution, and with an entry-level hardware platform, it makes sense for them to be married. I don't know if they're targeting that, but
I think so. Are there any other advantages of being streamlining, setup time, things like that?
I think personally that one of the things that I've been working in over the past few years is high-end cinema, and using companies like French company Trinov, who have developed technology to actually control loudspeakers and optimize loudspeakers that I think that we as an industry could learn an awful lot from. And when you have you've got a complex system in a
time, and hats off to Dolby before Trinov. I mean, the Trinov thing is astonishing, but
you said the D word. I
know, I upset you, but
it's like doing all
goes so well, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry, but the workflow definition and the creative XYZ kind of approach, where you get a given set of parameters within a creative environment, and you have a given set.
Yeah,
of parameters
it's a creative environment. Only Dolby will let you do anything. It's like.
Oh yeah, no, it's
I
very
hate
shut
that.
down.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you have read the first manuals of how to deploy a cinema system for Dolby Surround, this was easy. It was American. It was one microphone, a couple of curves, and then you were done. The thing is nowadays, with the processing and calculation power that we have ahead of the deployment of the system, we can optimize the system completely, solely before we set it up. We know what it's doing, and you bring it on. And my take on that is, and I'm doing it since quite some time, I'd rather leave my measuring microphone at home because most of the things that happen there is bollocks.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. There's a lot of flat curves that sound terrible out there.
If the thing is designed correctly, you don't need to optimize afterwards. Just a little bit here and there, but you can do that by use.
One of the things that I found really interesting using TiMax is that the actual system alignment and stuff has basically gone away. I mean, in the shows that I've done over the past year or so with TiMax, I don't think I've actually EQ'd the system at all.
Use good speakers, though, don't forget.
Oh yeah, so there is that. But no, I mean it's. I think yes, it's testament to the loudspeakers, but the way that the thing actually delivers audio to an audience, it means that kind of thing is less important.
Exactly, it separates.
There's a thing called spatial unmasking, which is actually about separation, and very often an engineer has to dig holes to fit the vocal in and stuff, and because we're used to hearing stuff coming from different directions, if we do that sympathetically, properly, that probably is part of that thing.
Equalization is a fix-it, isn't it? It's a tool to sort of cope with shoving everything down a very narrow bottleneck.
But most spatial engines do spatial unmasking to a degree or other that actually helps you balance the show. Actually mixing it in the air, you're not mixing it in the desk.
The number of engineers who say, I've never heard that microphone work so well before, or the guy's got a new bass and it sounds, I've never heard it, so everything is exposed, and he's really working on the individual sounds rather than this, as I say, a bottleneck. So is that a reason why manufacturers should invest in spatial sound then, because everything's going to sound better?
It certainly is, why should we reproduce audio then, it in reality happens in our world? We are not sitting in a channel-based world right now here and somebody is providing a stereo mix. Everything we are just experiencing since we were born is object-based. It's just objects around us, and this helps us to localize ourselves in our world. So why should we do that different in audio reproduction? There is no reason for that. So for me, this train has left the station, and you have to be quick to be able to jump on, because this train doesn't stop.
I completely concur with that. There's lots of little hurdles we've still got to jump through to make sure that the wider audience space is covered effectively, so that the people on the front left and the people on the rear right get an equally good show. But the opportunities to push instruments back and out of the way rather than just louder or quieter or more trebly or more bassy. It frees up so many possibilities.
I'm just calling it, with spatial audio, all of a sudden, our one-dimensional world that we have in a channel-based system is becoming a multi-dimensional world. And the superposition of information can only happen in a multi-dimensional world. And this is what we reproduce with spatial audio. And I think this is really important to understand. As soon as you do the spatial unmasking, you're already working in a multidimensional world. And this gives us a complete different experience to the people, right? And it's not that you hear the same over here that you hear over here, but you hear the right perspective. And this is important because this is what you see, this is what you expect, and this is what makes you feel comfortable to lean back and listen to the show.
First thing you've got to do is convince the production manager to pay for it, though.
So which leads to your question. Leads back to your question, like how to convince the production manager
I'd love to know.
do it.
Can you tell us how you do it?
Just send him to me, and that's fine.
The little badge.
No, but this is where I think, as a company who is able to deal with speakers and technology, it's very. We will really help immersive and spatial audio to be adopted, because if we go back to prediction again, prediction gives you the possibility to demonstrate how it will be effective when you deploy the system, and it will help you to qualify your system to see if it's going to be powerful enough without putting too much boxes as well, so we can contain a bit. You can contain the budget at the, let's say, it will be the most adapted to what you are expecting. You will not be afraid to put a certain number of boxes, and not more, to be sure that you will not fall short. So for budget-wise, it's very important. As a company, we are starting to develop speakers. I think it's the same for DNB as well, that are more useful, more practical to deploy, where you will need less boxes, you will have less ringing steps, you will have a coverage that's more optimized for the spatial deployment. We have high channel count amplifiers. We are heavily pushing on Milan as well. Everything is ready to make immersive less and less painful to use. So adoption will be better. Budget-wise, it's already quite close if you really look at designs that are optimized. It's not so much more expensive than a normal system.
Anyone else?
Do you mean outside of rock and roll kind of thing? I mean, obviously,
Yeah, well,
theatre's been ahead of the game more than any of the rest, I guess.
It is everywhere.
Yeah.
So, well, what are the factors? What drives the customers towards you? What do they want to do?
Well, I think that people are getting more used to a more authentic experience that actually Ralf alluded to. You know, not least the instincts that we respond to by being used to hearing panoramic sound, for the sake of argument, in real life. And it's once you've heard an orchestra done spatialized compared to in stereo, even though it could be a very good stereo mix, it's a more satisfying and engaging and relaxing experience. If you then take that further into the realms of vocals and people moving around a stage and then being in the right place, there is a real thing called audience stress that gets relieved and disappears, in that context. But at the other end of the scale, when this speaks to the production manager thing that Simon mentions and Sylvain's, when you get out into an arena tour situation, we did the Tool tour in what they would call spatialized, and they just did end on stereo. They weren't going to look for the wide hangs across the front, and they put a complete 3D cocoon of sound in overheads and rears. That's the bit where the production managers complained about, an extra rigor and that kind of thing. But that the impact that had on the gig was probably more significant, to be fair, than the array of speakers across the front, because it meant that, and with Tool, which is a very complex musical band, and the amount of automation that they added, it just wrapped the thing around everybody in a way that they'd never heard before.
Is that the final frontier then?
It's beyond surround. Surround can be irritating, as you know, hi-hats over your left shoulder. You've got to be careful with it, but just picking out little elements of it, reverbs, swelling them in, that's beyond just having it out a bit nicer and more natural in the front,
I mean, concert touring for rock and roll and pop, is that the last sort
of course,
is that
it's
the
where logistics matters, right?
I mean, the thing is, for me, there is no specific segment. There's rock and roll, there's musicals, there's classical music, there's also a parliament where this could be very helpful. The thing is, what we really have to do as a manufacturer right now here is we have to replace the picture of what they want to achieve, the engineers want to achieve and the musicians want to achieve in their head, and replace it with something different, with something better. Right? And this is beside the technology, the big task that we have as a manufacturer. We have to bring them on board. We have to give them ideas. We have to rebuild their worlds to understand spatial audio and what it can do for them.
I think the thing that's really excited us actually is that there's obviously at the high end, there's that engagement when you get the really high-end speakers. There's so many good ones out there. A well-done, highly-end immersive array is a fantastic thing, whatever you pick. But the thing that surprised us playing with the technology from Flux in an early stage is actually, that's great, but what can you just do with a little MacBook and a little mixer in a box and some powered portable speakers? What can you actually achieve? So at what point can we start getting people to stop thinking, okay, I start my life in stereo and then I gradually upgrade my concept and I have to reprogram my brain into placing objects in space? If we can bring that in, and we discovered we can do with a £1,000 mixer and about £5,000 worth of speakers, something which is actually a compelling array, and then suddenly if we can get people who are coming in at an education level, a community theatre level, their first kind of rock and roll shows, but they could chuck another couple of speakers up there and do something a bit interesting. That's where I think that process of from start to finish, we start to get the engineers' adoption.
I think it's one of the problems is that a lot of people faced with I'm going to call it Spimmersive. Is that okay?
Immersive.
Yeah, Spimmersive
Okay.
system.
Write that down, Joe.
Yeah, is that they don't know what to do with it. It's. I mean, the classic example. Like some of the clubs that have got immersive systems in, and yet nobody's got the material to do anything with it, and so it sits there doing nothing. And I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because, I mean, yes, of course, it all begins with education, and all of us, everybody here in this whole exhibition, everywhere, we've spent our whole life listening to stereo, and it is when you're faced with music that you are familiar with, trying to imagine how that might be made Spimmersive is difficult. There are some people who are really good at it. Stephen Wilson's done an amazing job on some Tears for Fears stuff, some XTC stuff, all kinds of things, and some of his own music as well. But it's a kind of a strange thing to get your head around, because you're so familiar with that stereo soundscape that thinking about things with much more depth and width and height is difficult. And if you're creating, however, you're composing, and you have the kind of mind that works in that way when you're composing, then that's a different thing, because you can then start to write with that in mind. And I think that starts to become really interesting.
I think the artists will have a big part to play in this.
But we have to educate the artists as well. They're precious few, the ones who I think are really. There are people out there with massive possibilities, but I think there are precious few who are really aware, much beyond 5.1, of what's possible.
Right. Okay.
It's much less challenging when you start enlarging the scale of the concerts, because when you are in a studio with a 5.1 or 7.1, it's not always obvious that you gain system. Just the fact that you have a very high resolution and mostly mono arrays giving you a signal that's very well separated, you already gain a lot of connection with the music, and you can feel that the audience is much more connected to the message that you want to convey, even before being very well versed in immersion. But this is only something that you feel when you are in a usage where stereo is starting to fail. And I would not say that in a studio, stereo is so bad. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, you'll never have a better opportunity than this to ask any questions of these gentlemen gathered here, because this is quite a unique lineup you've got here. I don't think they'll ever be in the same room again. So there is a handheld. If anyone has any questions that they've always wanted to ask about spatial audio and how it all fits together, this now is your opportunity. No, right? Everyone knows.
Of course.
Everybody has.
It had to be you.
Thanks, guys. Really interesting. It's a really interesting subject. Something I'm very excited about. What can you do to make it quicker and easier to access? And having myself been there in many years ago with TiMax systems and a spreadsheet and a piece of string and measuring tape and working it all out, and spent a lot of time programming DSPs to do stuff. What can we do to make it more accessible and quicker to do that kind of like first pitch hello world thing and get it rolling. So then people can experience that entry-level thing and then go on from there rather than struggle to get past square one.
If I can just speak to your prior experience of TiMax, what you were doing then I've done myself in the past. That's now a single button push, as you probably know, which you can do at home in your office or whatever and get to the show. It's intelligent enough to get you faders up without having heard anything and have a really good start point. Everybody has remarked at how effectively our auto calculation rendering works. And then, as you know, because we have this transform called an image definition, you're able to get in and manipulate it either with further adaptive calculation. But I think automating the rendering process generally on whoever's system it is a major part of achieving what you're talking about. And the more that gets, of course, two of these systems are actually a part of an ecosystem that already has all of the data in it in order to do that. So they kind of by definition are doing that, and I'm guessing that the Harman solution will ultimately work towards that as well. But being part of the ecosystem that includes knowing where the speakers are, where they're pointing at, and what numbers need to be involved with rendering the spatial outcome is probably something that answers that question, I guess, yeah. As well as, by the way, knowing what you want to do with it. When someone says, I want to go immersive, please do find out in advance what they mean.
And I think another important thing is the speakers can get smaller. You don't need the vast line arrays anymore. The experience level, with the immersive experience that you get, happens, on a quite lower level than you would require with a stereo system. So all the loudspeakers can get a little bit smaller. They can be better integrated into the set design. And I think this is a matter of also, again, education. Teach people how to make that happen. I think we all on the same level in kinds of, how to simulate, plan, and deploy a system. This is, more or less a done job. Important is that you understand, if you pre-produce your content somewhere in a small studio, it has to be scalable. You have to take it out, you have to push a knob, boop, and it's all there and it's big. And it's still the same experience. I think that's important.
I think control is going to be one of the big ones as well, like with open source control elements, then bringing in third-party apps that allow you to interact in a way which is a little bit more universal. At the moment, it is a kind of, well, you could do it this way, that way, or another way, and the workflow isn't yet defined. I think as we get more and more users adopting it from an earlier and earlier age, there will just become a natural, all right, well, when you tilt a thing or when you push a thing forwards and backwards, it pushes things upstage, downstage, and you'll start building things which people just go, that's the way that you do integrate that kind of thing. And whether it's part of a console or whether it's part of a tablet control or whether it's a dedicated piece of third-party hardware, that will come as more and more people start to use it.
I think that we should be looking, and maybe you guys are, I don't know, but we should be looking at loudspeakers that know where they are in three-dimensional space. That would make things a lot easier. And Brew is nodding, so that must be a good idea.
Maybe your question was about onboarding as well, not only really handling projects, and that's why we have focused on that software suite that can run only on a computer, on headphones. So you will start the very same project on your computer with your headphones in binaural, and that session that you have built from there, you have already made decision on the mix, on speaker positions. The very same session can be used now on a real deployment. You have some, in our tools, we have some scale simulation feature as well, which gives you the possibility to already experience how it will react in a big environment. At the same time, you would be designing your system, as Ralf mentioned, on our prediction software. So you can already quantify or qualify the quality of your design. So everything is prepared in advance. You don't even need speakers to start with, and you will still conduct exactly the same session. It's not something that you will need to transform or to port to a different software. You take your session with you and you apply it in a venue, and it's exactly the same session that you had created on your computer at first. So in terms of onboarding, I think we will all start to take the same direction anyway. It's really about creating content way before you are in the venue, and not only the content, but all the choices that need to be done to do your spatial your spatial show. So I think we are quite on a good way. There is still a lot to do, of course, but we are already taking that direction.
Any more questions? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I just have a question in terms of end user experience. You guys were talking about in a venue, if it's a sort of immersive spatial audio experience for the user, if you're not in a certain position, then you don't get to perceive the audio. If you're not in the hotspot, basically things might seem not in the right space. So what sort of solutions, I don't know, are being worked on in future? Like you was, one of the guys said maybe the speakers knowing where they are. Would it be where the audio source, if I'm on the right-hand side of the stage and the sound is coming from, my left-hand side, will there be sort of trackers or something to...
Are you talking about audience members?
Yeah,
It's
end user
about,
experience.
it's
yeah.
about time. It's about delay time. So without proactively managing the arrival times of the speakers to all the audience members relative to what you're trying to localize to, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to create what you describe as a sweet spot that covers the whole audience.
Would it mean having binaural headphones then?
No. What I mean is the speaker system needs to be timed independently. The speaker systems need to be timed independently back to every source that you're trying to localize to. So if you've got an orchestra with 60 piece, wherever you're sitting, essentially you need a different timing from the speakers that you're hearing to every instrument in the orchestra to make sure that you hear it in the right place, the same place as someone who's sitting somewhere else. And so if you handle that properly, it will work and can be made to work. Otherwise, you're always challenged by the biology, the combination of biology and physics that
So would that mean people would maybe have to wear headphones or not? No. Okay.
So one of the main things that attracted us about Flux, and this is going to sound like a plug, but it was the exciting penny drop moment for us, was you chuck on wavefield synthesis and you are simulating a sound wave propagating through an array, which means that much in the same way that you have multi-point source array arrivals, but when you do it as a reproduced sound front, then you may be next to one speaker at the front, which is the point of emanation, or you may be between 20 speakers at the back, but because they're all creating the same arc of sound by that arrival and wavefront time, that was the moment where we had to listen to it and walked forwards and backwards from the location and went, okay.
I think that clarifies it for me as well. Thank you.
All
Yeah.
these systems, to a greater or lesser
Good
extent,
question.
are
Thank
doing
you.
something similar there to make sure that you get that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought about that because when 5.1 came out years ago, it died really quickly, and 3D TV and that sort of thing. But when Dolby came, I thought, oh well, is this going to be a fad? But no, it's obviously not, and I'm really interested. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I really have a very different answer to your question because we are not using gain and delay in our algorithm. It's really about amplitude. So in our situation, it's much simpler to explain. You need to have, in an immersive deployment, you need to have such a quantity of speakers that you never have a very weak phantom image between two speakers. So wherever you are in the audience, you are never in a bad spot where you will have a phantom image that will be built between two speakers that are very far apart. So in the end, you will always hear the sound like it's coming from the source that you have positioned, because that source will always be reproduced by, most of the time, one speaker, or in the worst case scenario, two speakers that are maybe 2 meters apart. So in that situation, it really sounds for most of the audience that the sound is coming from where you look at.
Thank you, Sylvain. Well, it's not a fad. I really don't think it's a fad. I think it's going to transform audio experience everywhere. Anyway, that's it. Really pleased. Ben, Dave, Simon, Sylvain, and Ralf. Give them a round of applause. They'll never see them in the same room again. It's an absolute privilege. Thank you very much.